one of the questions had to be in a few words, kind of comment on 40 years, which is almost impossible. But the one thing that comes to mind are just the people. And this opportunity, it gives you a chance to think back of all the people that have come through, and just even all the people at the university, that have been here, and some that we've lost, and like Debro or Tim Politan recently, Joe Gianelli, just so many people that have impacted our program and have been here, had been here with us. So it's a nice way to be able to remember them.
Why did you get into coaching?
Why did I get into coaching? Well, honestly, I got into coaching because I always knew I was going to coach and teach. I was always going to be a teacher. I was that kid back when you actually had a regular chalkboard writing. I always was the one writing on the chalkboard. I was always in charge, was going to be a teacher. And then when I went to college, I just had the best experience. I loved school. I did well in school. I had great friends, basketball. We won a national championship. I learned a lot. I was involved in intramurals. I was involved socially on campus. I just had a great time. So when I had the opportunity to coach in college, I thought, I'd love to be able to give other young women the same opportunity to enjoy their college experience like that, like I did. So that's kind of how, and then I also thought, if I don't like it, I'll just stop. I gave myself an out. But I ended up making it into a career. So.
Do you remember your first impressions of Gino?
Well, my first impressions of Gino, when you get on the recruiting trail, I was just new into college coaching, and he certainly had a presence about him. And I had met him, I guess, on the at a game or whatever, and I knew he thought he was pretty swell. he thought highly of himself, as did other people too. But really, what got me is, so I met him, and then the following spring, I saw him at the Final Four, and he acted like he didn't know me. So I was like, "Who's this guy?" Then from there, it became a real friendship.
CD, would you characterize your relationship with Gino as sort of like an odd couple? Because he says that you're really the organized one, and he could really care less about those details. Would you characterize it as?
I thought you meant like tall, and short, and
Squat?
heavier. I don't know if it was ever the odd couple, because we are alike in a lot of ways. In some ways, not a lot of ways, just in some ways, in terms of our philosophy and what we saw as the vision for UConn, in terms of how we wanted our teams to behave, how we wanted to look, how hard we wanted to play, what we thought about, all of those things, we were on the same page. Just kind of how we got to the ending, a little bit different. He would be considered an idea guy, and I guess I would be the one that would get it done.
Old married couples tend to bicker. You guys bicker at all?
Yes. Bicker? Well, I think we bickered, I don't know, maybe we still bicker. There's more people around, so when it was just the two of us, there was probably a lot more bickering, just because it was the two of us. Now we have a much bigger staff, and I don't think we bicker as much, maybe, although they might disagree with me. But we definitely have our own opinions, but that's the great thing about working with Gino. I think he wants you to have an opinion. He wants you to challenge him. He challenges you as a coach, as a person, and I think that's one reason why we've been able to last and work together for so long. I think if it was status quo, it would be easy to get bored, but it's never boring with him, but it's not boring when you get challenged, and every year is a challenge, every day is a challenge.
How close did you come to leaving?
I'd say there were probably two places that I was most interested in, and that I went on interviews. Because this other story that goes around how many offers I had and all that, I'm not sure that's accurate, but there were two that I was seriously interested in, and the timing just didn't work for me at that point. And then it gets to a point where you really love where you are, and you find fewer and fewer places that you're drawn to or that you're interested in. So
Sweetie, is that like for you to both spend your whole entire career here? It says a lot about like, your relationship, but also like what you built here. Like you said, like why would you go somewhere else when what you built here? But is that part of like when you reflect to think like you spent 40 years in one place?
Yeah, I think at some point, once you're here, once I was here for a while, I realized how hard it is to do what we've done, and that if I was going to leave, it had to be for a place that I felt confident that they had everything that I would need to be successful. The right people, and not about buildings, but just a belief and a vision and a commitment. And those places are, the more you know, there are fewer of those places that exist. So the more I stayed here, the longer I stayed here, the more I knew that this was a special place.
Gino said that one of the things he's most proud of is just what you guys have been able to contribute to the growth of women's basketball as a female athlete, as someone who was probably fighting for playing time and playing space when you were playing. What does that mean to you to be able to contribute to the growth of this game?
Well, that's one of those things that's hard to look back and think about. But just the number of players that we've been able to coach and that have gone on to establish themselves as some of the greatest in the game of women's basketball, and the fact that UConn will always have a place in history for a number of reasons, whether it's undefeated seasons, championships, consecutive wins, whatever the reason. Of course, I'm very proud of that. And once I retire, whenever that is, I think I'll be able to look back even with greater pride. It's hard when you're in the middle of something to really think back about all of those things other than the people and the pride that you have in them.
Can you explain how you guys built this? I mean, you said it's hard, but just to see what you started with and what it's become, it seems improbable.
Well, if I look back and I think about where we started, and everyone knows the story of the office and the field house and no locker room, a rotary phone, all of those, no secretary, no anything. It would seem very improbable and almost impossible. But when you're in it, I don't think we ever thought that. We never looked at what we didn't have. We always focused on what we had. And at the beginning, we really just had our vision and each other to kind of say, this is what we're going to do. And we were able to convince enough people to believe that same dream. And eventually, 40 years later, a lot more has happened than what we ever thought would have.
Were there a lot of different levels to that vision? I mean, Coach talks about initially coming in and just not wanting to finish last.
That was our goal. Our first year, our goal was definitely not to finish last. And we didn't. We were 7-0, and I remember thinking, there were all these articles. I remember the JI and the Current, they were writing these articles, and I thought, wow, they're going to build a statue to him when we're 7-0. And then we ended up losing. We finished at 12-15. So very quickly they learned you need better players. But that first year was a special year just because those players they weren't the most talented, but they would do anything we asked them to do, and they did. And I was really happy and proud for them because they didn't have to play in the 8-9 game that year. So from there, I think it was really, it's funny. I remember our first Final Four was in 1991, and I remember people in the league saying, well, we need to have what UConn has. And I was like, you better watch what you ask for, because they all had more than we had. Gino and I were the only 2 full-time staff members. We had a grad assistant and a part-timer. So there were schools in our league that were saying, we want what they have, yet they had a full staff, all full-time. So we were, I think in a lot of ways, that first Final Four opened the doors to a lot of people, because we were the first unexpected team to go, the first no-name school. And then the next year, Western Kentucky went, and I think everybody started to believe that it was possible, maybe because we went.
With just a rotary phone.
I'm sorry?
With just a rotary phone.
Yeah. Well, and the rotary phone was a shared number with men's track. So I couldn't even say UConn basketball. I'd have to say UConn, and then if it was for Greg Roy, because he and I shared it, I'd say, Greg, it's for you, because his office was 3 doors down from mine. So we had a close relationship. We were very good friends.
Chris, I remember the first couple times you took over for Gino.
And, I don't know if it was a media thing, fan thing, that was like, oh my God, how are we going to win without Gino? And you seemed, I don't know, annoyed or whatever, frustrated. I don't know what you want to say your emotion was. But, bunch of years later that you've done this over and over when you've had to. And just from an overall perspective, do you feel more appreciated now than you did before?
I have actually never worried about being appreciated by anyone other than our staff and our players and my parents. You have to be appreciated by your family. I've never worried about being appreciated. I feel very fortunate to be at a place where women's basketball is appreciated and that I have been recognized a lot, probably a lot more than most people who've done as good, if not better, jobs than I have. So I feel, fortunate to be at the University of Connecticut. But I was never annoyed by that.
No, you used to go like, they don't think I can coach.
Well, no,
I don't know who they was,
the other thing
I
is
live
that-
this.
Well, yes, but I think a lot of it is too. Some people think when I speak or they see an interview, let's say, "Oh, you have a personality," as if like I was a plant. So there would be a lot of questions about a lot of things, whether it was coaching or personality or whether I was ever going to be a head coach. But I did become better at handling those questions. I think that was probably part of it. But those first wins, the biggest change, the first time when we won, no one really cared. It was, we were at Seton Hall. The second time at 97, that opened my eyes because we were at home. Barb Colville was chasing me down in the women's locker room while I'm trying to get showered for interviews. So I had a much better appreciation for the things that Gino had to deal with at that point.
What does it mean to you that tomorrow is about you and Gino and not just him? I mean, he's going to set the all-time wins record. He is the head coach, but they've purposely made this about the two of you. That must feel good.
I don't know of any other head coach that would be as willing to share the limelight as he is, and whether it's with me in particular in this way, I just think it says everything about him, and I am appreciative for all the responsibilities he's given me and the trust that he has in me, and being able to share this with him in this way is really special to me.
The players talk about.
Don't you wish we were asking you about not having a personality?
The
Or
players.
emotion. I do have emotion.
The players talk about the way that you instill professionalism in them. What does that look like for you, and what has made that such a priority for you as a coach?
I think there's a certain way, I've always believed there's a certain way that you can carry yourself. And as a woman, as a female athlete, coming from an era where being a female athlete was not always looked at as a positive, always trying to make sure that you handled yourself in a way that was positive and that you were able to show that you were a strong female while you're able to play basketball and still look appropriate, dress nicely, have fun, do all the stuff that everyone else does. But there's, when I was going through it, there was a different kind of stigma to being a female athlete. And now it's about, I think being a strong female, dressing for the job that you want, setting yourself apart in a positive way. And I think you can do that by how you treat people, the relationships you have with people, but how you approach, you're supposed to dress for the job you want. So if you want, whatever job that is, if you want to be the first owner in the NBA, the WNBA, you want to be a CEO, you want to be able to present yourself in a way that exudes confidence, and that you're able to handle yourself in a lot of different situations.
Did you ever think that your job would mean teaching so many young women that they need to wear pantyhose to certain ages?
I didn't know that the pantyhose caused such trauma across the board for every one of our players. I just didn't know that.
So many different classes.
Oh my word. I don't know. I guess I've actually changed a little bit. Now, you don't always have to wear. I guess you don't always. I do, but you don't always have to wear stockings. But just appropriate dress, appropriate attire for wherever you're going. That's what I go with. Appropriate attire.
How would you like to be perceived as a coach? Because for so many years, people looked at you as the team mom, and you're obviously
I didn't
so
start
much
as the
more than
mom.
that.
I started as the sister, and then it became the aunt, and then the mom. And I'm not to the grandmother yet, but so start with where we started, because I wasn't that much older than they were.
How would you rather be perceived than as the team sister / mom?
Well, I think if you talk to our players, I've had the opportunity to coach a lot of really good players, and in particular, post players. I'm demanding. I'm not loud per se. Like, I'm not a screamer, but they know when I make my point. And I think I've always been, teaching is in my background. I've always been able to work with players from a fundamental standpoint and then build on that and then allow them to be creative, whether it, Maya, Bram Stewart, Steph Dolson, and I've learned from all of them because they were all different to coach. So I've had to, and even now Jana, Ice, throughout my career, you have to learn how to how our post players have played, how our team has played, is somewhat a reflection of the kind of coach that I am.
You have a lot of players coming back for this. How important is that relationship once they're done playing? That you've coached, you brought some great players here, but you brought great people into the program as well.
Yeah, I'm to have as many players as we have coming back in the middle of the week. It's just it just means a lot. I can't put into words how much it means to be able to have players that you've spent time with. But the best part about my job is the players, whether it's coaching them now, but even more so like a parent. Once they leave, they almost have a better idea of why you did the things that you did, and your relationship can change. They have kids, they're getting married, they can call you if they're playing overseas and they're whining about their coach, which I never let them do, but or in the WNBA. So I think the watching them grow, it's very rewarding, but then having the relationship after that, they can call you at any time and share news and complain, like I said, or be upset if they have something going on. That's what I cherish the most.
That first year you won the Big East tournament back in '89. The previous offseason, you pretty much turned over your entire roster. Just what do you remember about that? And was it difficult to have to get a lot of players out the door to bring in that Debbie class?
I figures you would bring that up.
I remember it vividly.
Honestly, I remember sitting, so where our office was, we had a window. And it looked into the old field house, and looked into the back of the bleachers. So you couldn't see anything except the bleachers. But I remember sitting there, and I left my office, went up there, and I was sitting by myself, and Laura Licious came up to me, and she sat down, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I want to go through this. And she said, no, we're going to be good, and we're going to have people that want to be here and all that, and want to be coached by you guys. And so I was like, okay. And we ended up having 7 new players. Our manager from the year before was on the team, Kathy Bantley, and that was our first. And then we had Megan, Wendy Davis, Stacey Wetzel, Shannon Saunders, Debbie Bear. So we had a really young team, Carrie, Laura, and we had 11 kids on the team. One of them was the manager, and we ended up having the best season ever. So it was a lesson to me for sure.